And we're back. Tom Gibson with Chuck Augustin. And Chuck, you had something you wanted to bring up?
Yeah, we're trying to link everything with this New World Order and the quest for a one world government with what's going on in Nye County, Nevada, you name it. One of the things I think that's very much evident to people that look at the world in an objective view and don't mimic the opinion of the herd, let's call them, is that basically humanity is being rounded up. We're being put in urban areas. And anyone going back to the 50s, you know, to me is not old. It must mean I am getting old. But you can see how the suburbs have been taken away, how rural places like Pahrump is being basically eliminated. Now, when I say eliminated, it's not happening where troops are moving in and taking us, you know, out, let's say.
It's being strangled.
Yet. However, anyone that follows the BLM issues with their acquisition of more and more land, especially in Nevada, and especially Nye County, you can see that the amount of land given to people is shrinking. In other words, government is growing like the monster it is, and it is taking over. Then you get into issues like water. Well, what's one great way to drive us out into their little urban areas? And it's to attack the water supply. Now, if you want to go into real conspiracies, we can talk about that issue we mentioned earlier in an earlier show, chemtrails. It seems like this 15-year drought coincided perfectly with these streaks in the sky that many people have called chemtrails, which were first reported back in '98 out of Pahrump, Nevada. And I can't remember the gentleman's name. He lives over by me.
You're talking about the radio show?
Yeah.
Bell.
Art Bell, that's right. I'm sorry, Mr. Bell. At any rate, he was one of the very first to report on chemtrails, and they're basically chemicals that are being put in the sky by aircraft. They spread out into a haze or a cloud, and they've been going on, like I say, since '98 and earlier. And obviously, they haven't killed us yet, but the drought absolutely coincides, you know, pretty much of when these things started en masse. And they're done all over the world. It's not just Nye County or Clark County. It's all over the world.
Well, I came to Vegas, or Nevada, but Vegas in particular, in October of '89. And when I did, I remember there was a few years after that, there was an entire year, it was early '90s, that it didn't even rain once. But now, I mean, today it's raining a whole lot more than it was back in the early '90s. If my memory serves me correct, I mean, I could go look it up and I'd probably, you know, half wrong. But it seems that if that's when the chemtrails started, maybe there was a positive effect by them.
Well, there again, I personally believe strongly that we are having warming. At least in Nye County, the summers are certainly hotter than I remember when I moved into Vegas in 1996, and then in Pahrump in 2001. And the last few years, the summers have been a lot hotter than I remember, and certainly the winters have been warmer than I remember. And if the average rainfall totals are correct, we are in a drought. Not only us, but California. But like I say, El Nino.
I think our phones are up. If you want to call in, I think our phones are up.
All right.
And please give it a shot. So, but no, you were saying you're...
Yeah, one of the things going back to the land, BLM, et cetera, I don't know what your opinions of the Bundys are. But again, we, as individuals, tend not to know what the heck is going on. We hear the news stories and we get the slants on the news stories. I do know that it is impossible for me as an American spent 20-something years in the Navy to watch an armed force, whether it be BLM, the feds, or the police absolutely manhandle a rancher.
Yeah.
And, confiscate cows, confiscate property. It goes against everything I've ever felt or read about what this country should be about.
I agree. And this this Bundy Part 2 up in Oregon, the whole thing there, it's not about trying to get control of this for any other reason other than to bring attention to Americans that the feds really don't own this land.
Exactly.
They took it over and nobody's calling them on it. We've got speaking of calling them on it, we have a caller, Amy. Good evening, how are you?
I'm doing good. I heard you talking about the phone lines and tried to get through, but this was my first success.
All right, you made it.
Uh-huh. I'm listening to the talk, and I've been involved in these talks for decades about the New World Order, and it seems to me at one point somebody was making issue about the War of 1812 being a revolt against the federal banking system, and also that our forefathers were against it as well, and that maybe the New Deal was the first step to getting it implemented into this country. Is that true? I mean, what do you have to say about that?
Well, I agree totally. The things I've read, basically, the War of 1812 was a Rothschild against the patriots of this country, Part 2.
Yeah, they didn't get it on at the beginning of the country. The founding fathers didn't allow for a centralized bank. They wanted, and Jefferson in particular kept it separate. And then I was also under the impression, though, there was still a lot of sore feelings between the Crown and the colonies, though, and that's another reason. And I think there were several factors, but I don't disagree that banking was an impetus for that war.
Yeah, and in fact, I think it's been a struggle from day one.
What about the New Deal? Do you think that had anything to do with the banking being introduced?
Absolutely, I do. I think the whole.
But I don't mean to cut. But the banking issue came up way before the New Deal, and it was there, and it was in existence from probably about the 1840s up until and when the Federal Reserve was created in 1913.
Yeah, and in fact, it's amazing because 1907 we had a depression or a recession, whatever you want to call them, and that was the excuse for creating the Federal Reserve, which then gave way to the Roaring '20s, which gave way to World War II, which gave way to the New Deal, and with a depression, a huge depression thrown in there. And this idea that these conspirators called the New World Order, or Illuminati, or whatever you want to call them, create the problem and then solve it at our expense, whether it be a war or a removal of our freedoms, rights, and privileges.
How do you think they're playing into the failure of all these international banks? First there was Greece that failed, then Spain that failed, and now they're talking about Germany going under and all these other issues in Europe. Is that all part of something to create this huge crash in this country too, and kind of taking everything over?
Well, it's one of two things, in my opinion, mind you. It was either contrived, but even the most brilliant people, I mean, when you're trying to deal with the complexity of humanity, it's too hard. I think what they do is they set people up for failure, and so rather than having like the New World Order people with their hands right on controlling, I don't think they do that. They control certain people like Obama that will run us into the ground.
And one of the great books, and I'm an avid reader, that I read is called War Cycles, Peace Cycles. And it basically lays out the history of banking and how banking has worked in conjunction with wars, which have worked in conjunction with destruction, which has worked in construction or in hand in hand with this thing called debt. And if you think about it, what is debt? Who do we owe it to? I mean, this massive debt we have in our country, whether it be personal or the government, who is it that created this money that we owe to? And the answer is the Federal Reserve and central banks, which constitute the financial control of this New World Order.
Someday, if I can get everybody to agree with me on this, I want to go on a national show and say, everybody, right now, stop paying your bills, stop paying your taxes, stop paying everybody everything, and just stop. And that would be one way to cause a financial revolution that would. What's that? Oh. Okay. So anyway, but if everybody just didn't pay their taxes, didn't pay their bill, their credit card bills, and I'm talking about going to the grocery store, not paying for that thing. I'm talking about credit cards and taxes, and just sit back and watch. But everybody would have to do it all at once. We'd all have to be united. But if 60% of the people of the country did that, because only 60% of the people are actually working, if that, or can afford it. But if they did, we would actually.
Well, good point. And
go ahead, Amy.
That's a good point. I want to say that I have no debt. I have no credit cards. But the taxes do scare me because they have set me up to lose everything if I don't pay the taxes. So that's my last step, which I wish I could comply with you because you have a great idea, but they hold that over my head.
Right, and they do all of us. Absolutely, they do all of us. And I think it's going to come to a head pretty soon. Now, I've been saying that for 30 years. Others have been saying it for much longer. But something is going to burst, I think, pretty soon. It could be related to the Bundys. It could be related to anything. We're getting to that point simply because this thing called debt is eating up the world economy and the system that they use to control us.
Right. And I don't mean to belabor the point, but if you noticed, when all the people from between 2007 to like a couple years ago, when all the people started losing their homes due to the economy, and there were so many foreclosures, those people weren't being foreclosed on. I mean, in other words, there were so many defaults, they couldn't foreclose on everybody. So anyway, that was the point I was trying to make. And we're almost out of time tonight, and we'll pick up more on this, but I want to, we'll do some more research and find some really gritty things to talk about. But I still want to stay on the New World Order situation. And I think, I thank you for joining us, and we'll see you in 3 weeks, or the third week of next month.